CNBC TV18 exclusive. We learned from sources that the government is likely to finalize the FAME 3 scheme in the next 10 to 15 days. Sources say that the government is considering a proposal for an outlay of 11,500 crore rupees, and it may stagger or reduce incentives on each category over the 2-year period. The scheme is likely to have incentives for electric buses, three-wheelers, two-wheelers. New categories like electric trucks, tractors, mining equipment could also be included. Charging infrastructure will also be covered, but whether swapping stations, battery swapping is included in the policy, that remains to be seen. Meanwhile, Sun Mobility has announced that it will be introducing the world's first modular battery swapping technology for electric vehicles in partnership with Bangalore-based bus manufacturer Veera Vahan. I caught up with Chetan Maini, co-founder and chairman of Sun Mobility, and I began by asking him about the urgency of having a FAME 3 scheme right now and the importance of also covering incentives for battery swapping.
The key is trying to make sure that the policy is a technology agnostic approach to things around policy, subsidies, and the entire structure. This will sort of promote different forms of transportation and solutions within the ecosystem. And particularly, as you mentioned, the industry is looking forward to having battery swapping also get the concessions and the GST reduced that would help that industry tremendously. In addition, I think the country is really looking for a large rollout on infrastructure. So structures around public-private partnership around charging and swapping infrastructure will really help electric mobility's work. The first role of the government was pushing around product. Now there also needs to be a push around infrastructure. And I think the industry is also thinking, are there options around the new models? So we have two-wheelers and three-wheelers and buses that got a good push in FAME 1 and FAME 2. Can other forms of transportation, like the trucking industry, which contributes to almost 50% of the pollution in the country, can these industries now also sort of be brought in to the gamut of FAME 3 that can really help the decarbonization agenda of the government?
All right. Now, just to speak to you specifically about battery swapping, we know that the government is likely to incentivize or continue incentivizing setting up of charging infrastructure in the country. Any conversation with the government on incentivizing battery swap stations?
I think there is, in many classes, the charging infrastructure is considered both swapping and charging. Right? But there is some lack of clarity in some of the policies. And that's what I meant to say, if it's technology agnostic at the policy level, and if charging and swapping stations are brought into the same gamut, then it's a uniform policy. So if at a petrol station there is a charging infrastructure and a swapping infrastructure, both should get the right benefits so that they both support the ecosystem. So we're hoping that FAME 3 corrects some of these anomalies that really helps these concessions also come through people who are putting up the swapping infrastructure in the country.
And finally, give us a sense of how Sun Mobility is going to further invest in swapping infrastructure in the country. Any collaborations that you're considering?
So as you're aware, we've our recent announcement with Indian Oil Company, they've invested over $78 million in the company, and over the next 3 years through our joint venture, which is a 50-50 joint venture, have committed to over $220 million. So with IOCL having 37,000 outlets across the country, we're rapidly expanding that. In fact, in the next 6 to 8 months, we're looking at doubling from over 1.7 million swaps that we do a month to over 3.5 to 4 million swaps per month. So we're really expanding the infrastructure for the country, and also recently showcased our solutions for heavy electric mobility at the Pravas event in Bangalore, which would go for trucks and buses all the way from 3 tons to 55 tons. So both in one side, we're looking at 2- and 3-wheelers that constitute 80% of the vehicles in India, and the other for trucks and buses that have 50% of the energy and emissions in the country. These are the areas where it's the highest level of decarbonization, where swapping makes a huge difference to the end customer, and we're working to just expand these networks on both sides.
All right, so electric vehicle ecosystem awaits the FAME scheme, and players like Sun Mobility are hoping there will be policy incentives and interventions for battery swapping stations in the country as well. We're taking a short break here on News Center, but lots more when we return.